All right, everybody, welcome back to this session. I still have no proper name, building a tool / productivity system comparison system platform with Coda for the paperless movement community. It's a long thing. It's a mouthful, but I love it. We will dive into this today again with Noah Silverstein. He's back on this session, and we had already a 1-hour session last week where we showed how to create databases and connect them with each other. And the ultimate goal really is to build as I mentioned, a tool comparison platform. I prepared something to visualize this a bit more, what we are there. But Noah, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a blast last time. I always love building up a new system in Coda, and I'm excited to do it again today.
Yes, me too. So let's get started. I will share my screen and share my Miro board where I just prepared a bit of an overview here. And what you can see is the ultimate outcome. So this is what I had in mind for the paperless movement community, that my members will be able to build their productivity system database on their own. So they're feeding their tools into their productivity system database and then get a great visualization out of their productivity systems. The purpose behind this is that we want to compare our productivity systems in the paperless movement community. And of course, we can draw this out and talk about this in posts and comments, but I always like having structured data and clean data. So this makes it much easier to compare. And having a vast variety of different business professionals in there from different areas, this might be also an opportunity. The bigger this becomes, it's more likely that you will find a productivity system out of your own work area. I think, well, the vision is big here. We will achieve this, I'm certain, and can't wait to get this off the ground. However, last time we focused on the tools database, all right? So when we want to create a productivity systems database, we will add tools that we use in this productivity system, obviously. And I don't want to have people writing down their tool that they're using. This will be a mess. Free text is always a mess. So we start with the tools database where we will just provide tool information, give people the opportunity to add their own tools they use, because I don't know all the tools in the world that are there, and give them their own reviews so they can already rate their tools and how good they are in the different parts of the ICOR system. So the ultimate goal here in this tools database is that we have a member-driven reviews database. We have a tool profile tab page. So I showed this last time that we have for each tool one page that summarizes all the information about this tool, what's the best purpose to use, the pros and cons, the reviews below that from the members and so on. So you really get an idea how this works. Something like GetApp or Capterra that you know, but very productivity system specific. This will be just awesome. And then we have a dynamic tool comparison table where we get tools next to each other and then start comparing them. Once we have this, we will dive into setting up the productivity system database. And we have CRM in the middle, which is contact relationship management. I just forgot it. Is it right, Noah? Contact relationship management.
Or customer, depending on who you're asking.
Oh, customer relationship. That's true. Yeah.
People like to use different words for the same letter.
I use that variation the whole day, and then you finally forget what it is the actual word.
Well, it came back.
The CRM, this is the center. So obviously, to me, I love data, and I will use this data carefully. It is closed. It's only in the community, so I won't share this anywhere else. It's just for the community. But I will learn a lot about from this connecting all together. I will understand much more how we can further improve this system that we built here, but also providing other things like tool courses. Okay, I could see what tools are really successful or many people are using or struggling with, or see the pros and cons. So I really find more information on how we can further provide more value in the paperless movement. And this will be a closed access. This is only be for the members because I only want to have high quality data in there. I have the experience having free stuff that everybody will share some opinion. It is different if you're in a closed community like this one. And then we have Typeform. So if you don't know what this is a survey platform where I reach out to you guys. Maybe you downloaded the iCore, the free iCore guide. You might went through the survey as well, where I ask you several questions about what is a single source of truth? Do you know this? Do you have one? How productive do you feel? Things like this. This also already helps me to understand better who you are. However, if you provide your email there, then I want to have this synced back. So I have a single source of truth where I can look at. I know many of you guys are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, having clients as well. And I think you can relate to this, having information about a person or about some other object that you're working on spread all over the place in different systems, and you look for the contact data here and you go into the other system and all this. So this is why so I'm using ConvertKit for sending you emails, having everything into one database, everything to connect it with each other, and then also getting the information what tools you use. Here's the use case. You have a one-on-one call with me. You booked 60 minutes. We want to use this highly efficient. And what I will do, I will just go into the CRM. I see exactly what tools you use, what productivity system is set up right now, and we can dive directly into where are the bottlenecks, how we can improve this, instead of actually starting to talk about, okay, what tools do you use, and just get a general feeling instead of having all the details. All right, talking a lot. Here, just as a side thing, this is just a screenshot from the community. So this will live inside the paperless movement community. And I love Circle to use this because it allows us to embed Coda. And I love Coda in this case because we can build up this complex database, but at the same time present it in a very nice way. And talking about presenting, this is what we will do today, Noah. Long talk, but I think to get more context is always important. And today we will focus on layout. All right. We will now lay out the data that we created last time, the databases, and make them look more fancy so we can embed them into the community eventually. Noah, let's get started.
A great transition. And I think, half of the battle is having the data in the right place, and the other half is having a way to interact with it, to digest it, to be able to read it and synthesize it. And our hope with Coda is that we're kind of bringing the best of structured and unstructured data together. We've built these rich databases where we can store all this very specific, detailed information in a really nice, structured way that relates to each other and links to each other. But we also want to be able to interact and look at the data. I think absolutely, what you've just described is really a wonderful idea, and having this kind of community-driven source of knowledge is great. But it's not worth very much if it just lives in an Excel table, for example, because no one's going to want to look at it. It'll be very difficult to parse, to actually get the information you want. It'll be error prone, and it's not easy to synthesize, to say, how is my system different than someone else's system? What are the ways that I'm struggling that other people are struggling with? All of those sorts of types of things. So yeah, I think, as you've said, today we'll take those base tables, those base databases that we set up last time around, and we'll think about how can we actually present that information in an easily digestible form, in a way that's nice to look at, of course. So just
maybe exactly. As a reminder, go quickly through the database that we created here. That would be nice.
Absolutely, we're on the same page. So literally,
absolutely, yeah.
So
on the same doc, you mean,
yeah, on the same doc. Well, the page in the doc, of course. You're welcome to come join me.
Yeah, true.
So we started with a tools database. That was where it all started. We knew that we wanted to have, a list of tools and be able to categorize information. And so each of these tools, we have some very basic information. What is the name of the tool? Maybe what category is it? And then we wanted to be able to pull in individual people's ratings for those tools. And so we worked our way to this tool ratings table. And the tool ratings table is for each person. They might have their own review of the tool. So the first two columns here are kind of the unique identifying information for each row in this database. It says, what is the tool that's being rated, and then who is giving the rating. And between the two of those, it's going to be a unique entry, right? I'll never review Excel twice. Maybe I'll change it at some point, but it's still one entity. And maybe you also would review Excel. In this case, both of us reviewed Word, but those are unique ratings. We each give our own rating, but for the same tool. And then, we set up some basic framework of what you might want to give for rating. Of course, we could build a more complex version of this, but in this case, just based on the iCore framework, we had you put in, rate this tool, for input, control, output, refine, just on a 1 to 5 scale. We have this nice little slider scale here that lets you choose a score. And then we had just kind of an open text field, which said, give us some general thoughts. What works well about this? What are the pros and what are the cons? We could obviously add more detailed information. Maybe what specific problems have you had? Have you encountered bugs? How was the customer service? All sorts of other things that might be good to collect. But this was kind of our starting point. And then because we wanted to be able to, summarize and store all this information and eventually, as you showed in that diagram, link it back to a CRM, we also added this people table. And this is a very, very simple version, but it is a CRM is what this is.
Yeah.
This is a database of people, and for each of them, we have a series of information. You have my name and your name. We can match based on email. So, as you described, maybe we'll pull in Typeform results, and then we could have another column here which finds all of the Typeform results which match that person, which maps, maybe it's my first and last name, maybe it's the email and the first and last name, depending on how many people you have and how careful you want to be about duplicates. So this will kind of be the central place where we keep track of the people and we can link information to it. And then the final thing that I'll pull out here is the relations that we've built between these tables. So, all of these nice little chips here, we call them the little circles. These are actually rich references between the tables. So all of these columns are of type lookup in Coda. And lookup is basically you want to reference a row in a different table. In this case, the tool one, this is looking up a tool from the tools table. And so what that means is you have a list of all of the tools that live in the tool table. If I add another tool here, then when I go to choose from them, that tool is now an option here. So that is a rich link between the two. It's the same with this person column here. This is a lookup to the people table, so I can choose from all of the people who exist in the CRM. And then we've built some backwards or reverse lookups, we like to call them as well, which says I can actually find all of the things which have looked me up. I can find all of the back references. And so in this case, what that means is let's find all the ratings that referenced Noah, that referenced me, that referenced this row, this person. And so, we used some Coda formula magic. It actually wrote it for us, but it wrote a kind of very common Coda formula here, which basically says, let's look at some database, some table, and let's find all of the entries in it. So we're filtering it down to all the ones where that person column matches the current person we're talking about. So in the case of this row here, find all of the entries in that ratings table that have Noah selected for the person column. And you can see it, nicely pulled in all of my reviews. And similarly, we did the same thing down here for tools, which said, instead of filtering to be all the ones that match Noah, let's filter all of the ones that match Excel or all the ones that match Notepad++. And then I guess the final thing that we did on top of that, after we had these rich references, we started pulling out some data from those references. So these 4 columns here were 5 actually, where we're pulling out the averages and the counter of reviews. All of these were using that backwards reference, that looking back at backlinks and saying, what are all the reviews that mention Notepad++? And then what is the total count of them? So we wrote some pretty simple formulas here that just said, take all those tool ratings that we found that match and say, how many are there? We're just going to count them up. And then, similarly, we said, find all the tool ratings. For each of those tool ratings, pull out what the input score was. So you can see it's nicely highlighting that column we're looking at. It said, okay, we're starting with tool ratings. Then we're pulling out the input scores for each of them, and then just take an average. And we did that for all 4 of these categories. So you could imagine, we talked about that radar chart idea. At the end of the day, we want to say, overall, according to everyone's reviews, what is the average input score? What is the average control score, the average output, and the average refine? And that would give this, community perspective on how a tool performs. Is it, good at certain things, not good at other things?
Yeah.
And I
so
think
the last column that we added there, the last column that we added there is the summary, which is a canvas. And
so
I think this is what we will work on today, to present a single tool and the data that we collected about this tool in a visually pleasing way.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the new beta feature with our editor that we just launched recently, and basically allows you to have all of the rich content you would expect in a page within a row. So all the things you'd expect, you can add a table in here just like you would right on a canvas. All of the other things that you might want to do. So absolutely, we will use that. But I think a good place for us to start is actually just maybe building a view of this database. We don't want to be looking at this kind of back-end data. And then maybe just cleaning up how this base information is stored. It's legible right now. We can see all of the properties that are in the database in that base table, but it's not very easy to parse. It's taking up a lot of white space here. Each of these columns are just going to be a number between 0 and 5, so we clearly don't need the entire width here. That's kind of a waste of space. So I think there's some pretty basic improvements before we get into anything fancy that we can make. Does that sound like a good place to start?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Great. So we have another page here called Tools. And I think where we'll want to start is actually just making a view of that table. If you're not familiar, the way that things work in Coda is you have kind of your source of truth, this base table that we created. This is the Tools table. And you can see that currently we don't have any views of it. And so what's wonderful about Coda is that you can look at this same data, this same database, as many times as you want, anywhere you want, and in lots of different ways. And so what that means is I can go ahead and create a table just like I was going to, but instead of creating a new table, I can actually make a view of one of the existing ones. So in this case, I'll make a view of the tools table. And what this means is this is a full entity, a full kind of copy of that data, but it's live and linked to it. So if I'll just drag this back over to my data page. So now that I have them right next to each other, I have the tools and I have the view of tools. And these are richly connected. These are the same thing. So if I start typing here and I make a change, you can see it updates in the other one. So this is looking at the same data, but I can have it in multiple different places. And of course, I can look at it in different ways. So for example, we're showing it as a table, but I think we might eventually want to have a nice card display. I think that'll be a lot easier to parse. So now again,
especially when you go to the comparison table, then
exactly. We're going to want to at least categorize them, right? You're going to want to look at all of the spreadsheet tools. You're going to want to look at all of the project management tools, OKR tools, whatever it might be. So I can look at it in different ways. What works for you, what works for your team, what works for the use case, right? In the backend data page, I probably just want a really condensed form where I can see all of the data in a small form. But when I'm looking at it, comparing tools, I probably want a visually easy to parse, easy to compare. So I think cards would be a better use case there. So I'll just bring that view back up to our tools page, and we can work here and leave that data page on the back end. So we've started, very simple here. I made a view of the existing tools table, and I didn't really do much else other than that. I turned it into cards. Of course, there are other ways we could turn this into a detail view if you want to be able to look all of the information rich. Depending on what type it is, maybe it's best shown as a timeline or a chart or anything like this. I think in this case, cards is probably the right decision. You can see here it's giving me some recommendations to clean up. I probably don't need to show everything on the surface. So we can choose which of those columns are going to show at the top level. I think at a minimum, we'll probably want the name of the tool and maybe the category that it takes up. Eventually, I think having a photo, maybe a logo, for example, could be really nice here. In fact, why don't we just do that to give an idea of what this would look like, since we're trying to make something that looks nice today. So I could just go ahead and add in a column here. So I'll just insert to the right of this column, and I'll make this an image column. And in this case, I'll actually just do an image URL, which lets me take a URL from somewhere else on the internet and have it displayed in Coda. So if I just look up real quick, I'll pull in an Excel logo. I'm just going to go to Google Images, which you won't see, but that's all right. And I'll copy a link to that image. So I'll just right click and do copy image address, and then I'll just paste that here. So what I just pasted in is this URL that links to Wikipedia that has an image stored there. But Coda was smart enough to know that it's an image.
Yeah, just to mention here for the guys watching, listening. I do this a lot in Notion as well, and I showed even on a video that you can use image URLs. Obviously, you need to be aware that whenever this URL changes, that the image might be broken. So it's always great to upload an image if you want to keep it especially.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, we had two options here when I made this column. One of them was an image URL and the other was an image. So I can actually just upload these images if I want to as well and store them in Coda. And it just depends. For example, that first link came from Wikipedia, so it'll probably be around for a while. And it wouldn't be the end of the world if it disappeared. In some cases, you actually really want to use a URL. Maybe you're pulling a profile image, right, from Facebook.
But this is exactly, that was exactly the idea I had. So I was pulling the profile image from LinkedIn. However, whenever they change the images, the URL gets updated.
Right.
So it doesn't
so in that
stay.
Case, So in that case, uploading it might be better. So yeah, it definitely just depends on the use case. Another one is maybe your company likes to store all of your data in one place. Maybe you use Cloud App or some other app and you want to have all the information stored there. Well, then you could host it in Cloud App. That link's not going to go away, but you can embed it here. So it really depends, but they're good for different situations. But in this case, we'll just keep what I have. We could always change it. And then what I'll do here is I'll come back into the card options here, and I can actually choose a cover image. And in this case, it knows that image URL column is actually an image. And of course, there's a couple different ways we can show it, but I think something like that, just showing a little icon on the right, gives you a visual indicator of what the tool is, and of course just makes it look a little bit nicer.
I also like that we see some basic information that we could also choose what is shown there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I went into this columns option and I chose to show the tool and the category, but we also could show anything else we want. If we wanted to show the top level scores that are here, we absolutely could. And then, maybe we'd add the labels back, so I can choose whether or not I want to show all the labels. But maybe that's a little bit too big. We could.
Yeah, absolutely. Just go with the basics again. Just category, so we keep it clean and nice.
I'll just undo that. And of course, you have a lot of control just visually how you want this to look. So for example, I can use conditional formats just like I would in a table, but actually on the cards as well. So, a common thing that I'll do to make cards look a little bit fancier is you could just add a conditional format to the tool, and, maybe give this a nice bright color or something so that along the top, it stands out. And of course, you could also do this by category, right? Like maybe we want all of one category to have that little orange banner. Maybe we want the other category to have a green banner, and so on and so forth. But you have a lot of control here of how you want that to look.
That's awesome. Let's do this just for the sake of it. Make two colors for spreadsheet and text. So.
Right. So in this case, so let's start with the grouping, and we can get back to that because right now they're all together.
I see. Yeah, let's go ahead.
So I'll just leave it as gray for now. I think, but what you're getting at is kind of one of the key points we'd want when we're looking at a list of tools was we probably want to break it up. We don't want them all in one long list. We want to categorize them. And so we already have this, this attribute on them, which is the category. We made this little select list, which is just a list of text values, but it's saying what type of tool it is. And so when we're visually looking at this and we want to be able to present the information in a readable form, we use grouping all the time. And so I will just add in a group here, and we're going to group this by the category. And now you can see that all of the text tools are linked in text and all the spreadsheet ones are linked in the spreadsheet area. So it has broken up now where they live. And of course, you can collapse or expand these as you like. You can also change how it's grouped. So for example, I want to have them vertically grouped, how you would expect like a Kanban board, something like Trello for tasks. You could do that as well, maybe different task statuses. I think in this case, because we'll probably end up with quite a number of tools in each of these categories, I think doing it all along the left probably makes sense.
If everyone watching this coming from Notion, they just announced a grouping tool, I had a bit of a laugh because we had this available for ages in Coda. It's great implementation in Notion. Finally, we have it there. But, well, they got subgroups as well. So can you do this there as well in Coda?
Yeah, so we can do subgroups. I think currently we don't have the functionality with cards, but we do with
So Notion got you there.
Well, there's always something that different tools have a little bit different than each other. I would guess we'll have that at some point. But I think so what you're describing is we might
Just
want to group on the top by the tool and on the left by the category.
Ooh,
like that.
Well, I didn't see that in Notion, so I think this is much more useful as a pivot table that we can just create.
Yeah, exactly. And you can even do more than this. You could add nested groups here within the left or within the right. So there's a good bit of power there. But I think often
I see already using this for the productivity system comparison. I think this
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
gonna
So,
be give us a great map of everything. This is awesome.
Yeah, grouping along the left and the top is very
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah. Nice.
Yes, but I think in a lot of cases, just the simple group is really all you need. And of course, I'll just note that these are nice and interactable. So, for example, if I drag word from the text category up to the spreadsheet category, you can see that it actually changes the category. It was smart enough to know that they're grouped by this select list and can actually live change the value in that select list. So I can, move these around. Maybe that's the category or the priority or who owns the task, anything like that. In this case, changing what the category of the tool was. And we also could reorder how these different categories are shown up manually. We also could sort the categories if we want the categories to come up in a different order. So we have different options about how we're doing the grouping. Right now the sorting is just based on how you drag it, but I also could do it by alphabetical order or something else like that. So, okay, this is a great start. I'll also just point out, depending on if you're building your kind of visual interface to be interacted with, or if you just want it to be like read or looked at, you might show or hide different features. So, for example, we're building here something that I think mostly will be for looking at. I don't think you'll be adding new categories or new tools here. I think we'll have a different form for that. So in this case, we have this nice ability to actually hide this little new card button. If this is tasks, it'd be really nice to be able to click here and add a new tool and not have to go into a table behind the scenes to do it. But in this case, I don't think it actually makes sense to have this. So I can just right click on it and hide it. And so we don't actually have to see the information if we don't want to see it. So you have lots of control about what shows and what doesn't show. I think the next big step here is going to be playing with what shows up when you open one of these. So, we can click on any of these cards, but right now, as I said,
we want to have this profile page that I just mentioned in the beginning in the Miro board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think a good place to start here is just kind of laying out the basic information we have about each of the tools. So the way that we do this in Coda, we call them layouts. So when you open a row into kind of this full screen or modal view, you have control of the layout of how it looks. You can have really fine-grained control that across each of all of the entries in the database, how do you want to actually look at the data? It's not just in a list, but we can actually arrange it in all different ways. So in this case, I'll just click Edit Layout. And now this is going to allow us to fully customize and control what shows up in that layout. So at a minimum, I can also show and hide different columns. And that can be different in the layout than it is in the card view that you're seeing. So what I mean by that is if I add in all of these numbers here, for example, now when I'm looking at the card, I'm not seeing the numbers, right? Because we hid those columns, so you didn't have to see them when you're just looking at the tools. But when I open it up, then I can show more detailed information. This is also can be useful for showing different information in different places. So I might have one view where I want to see all the numbers, and I might have one view where I just want to see the text, right? I want to see people's opinions. So often you can have multiple layouts and use them for different things. So you can see in this case, we have that one layout that we were just editing, but you can have as many of these as you like and show them in different places. So it really allows you to display and look at the data in whatever way is best for the setup that you're building. So, I'll just give this maybe a better name. This is the tool view. And then we could, control what is being shown here. So, we have some quick styles you can apply that format things or work well with images, but it's also pretty easy to just build it up yourself. So, at a minimum, it already did a little bit of formatting for us. It kind of guessed that this first column here was the kind of unique entity, the name of this entity. And so it displayed it as an H0, kind of this big text, and it took away the label because you don't really need to label that is the tool. You probably know that it's the tool. It's probably pretty obvious because you clicked into a tool. And then on all the other ones, we have lots of control about how this information shows up. The column has a name, but maybe we want to give it a different name. Maybe we want a more detailed explanation. Just like when you're writing a form, you might want to add a long name. You might want to add a description of what a certain field is. So all of that you could add in here, right? So maybe we want to describe to people what does control mean in the framework. So you could add in a description here, which is a little one-sentence blurb that in the iCore framework, control means this, and it's important for these reasons. Just a sentence or a couple sentences that explains.
Love it. Can we just fill something random in so we can just see how it looks when it's filled out?
Yeah. So I'll just add in that little bit of filler
that's
text
enough.
that says control in the iCore framework means this. And we could do that for the other ones as well. So let me just add back all of these ones, and I'll just paste in that same thing so you can see what it looks like. And so, now when you're looking at each of these columns, you have a little blurb that basically tells you what is the data. It's not always obvious from what the column name is, what the data is, or how you should fill in the information or read the information. And so it's really simple, but sometimes just adding a little piece of text that gives an explanation is very, very useful.
Absolutely.
I think a next good step here, we kind of talked about the information density. We have this problem where 3/4 of the page is empty right now.
So make the columns.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a really simple thing we can do here is we can just drag and drop these around. So I can say, I actually want them to be next to each other. So I want input, control, output, refine, and I'll just put them all right next to each other, 4 in a row. And of course, I could do 2 by 2. I could control how I want this to look. But I've just switched from taking up the entire page to now just taking up this very small section up here. So that is already much, much better than it was before. One thing I'm noting as I'm looking at this as well is when the
logo is missing.
Yeah, the logo is missing. That's certainly one thing. The other thing I noticed is that when we were adding the ratings, we used this kind of fun scale option that shows you visually what the score is. And under the covers, this is really just a number, right? So this is under the column types. This is under number. We have a number of different, no pun intended, but a number of different ways that you can look at a number. You might want a slider that goes between 0 and 10, this scale between 1 and 5, but really it's just a number. It's just kind of a visual skin and an easy way to interact with that number. So what we could actually do if we come back here and we're editing this layout, I can actually modify and play with all the columns just like I could in the table itself. So in this case, I could right click on this average input here, and I could actually change the column type. So right now it's just a number, but I can actually just change that column type to be a scale. And now we're going to get the same,
Is
nice
this now
visual...
only for? Is this now only for this view, or is it now changed in general?
So this is changing the base table.
Oh, yeah.
So this is allowing me from that editor to actually come in and control the underlying data. Of course, if I wanted to show it differently for different views, I could. Probably an easy way to do that is maybe I want to have a number under the covers, and I could add another column which shows it as a scale, and you just reference that other column. In this case, it really doesn't matter so much because this is still a number. If I have a column and I'm writing a formula for that column and I reference that average input column, you can see that what it's outputting, even though it's a scale column, it's outputting a number. The output type of when you reference that is a number. So, the only difference is how you look at it and how you interact with it. In this case, this is actually a summary. It's formulaically driven, right? We're making an average of numbers. So really, this is just visually showing it differently. It's not even changing how you interact with it because it's not interactive. Like we did before, you could change the icon, all the different things you want. So I'll add the little lightning bolt back. But of course, we can do that here as well without having to go all the way back to where that base table lives. I can do all of that modification right here. I can say, I want to change this one. Also, let's make this a scale. Let's make this one a scale, and so on and so forth. And just, a little change like that can make it much easier to look at, much nicer to look at. It's not very easy to compare.
Especially numbers that are just limited to 5. It's much
exactly.
more
we know that these numbers are
visually
going to be between some scale. So if I open up the scale options here, again, let's set that one to bold, that one to bold, and this one to bold. And you can see just, because you asked me this question, I got this nice little snack bar down at the bottom. When I made that change, it said, hey, you're actually changing the format in all of the views, but also the base table. So it's actually giving me this nice little warning that says you're not actually just doing it for this view, but it's kind of giving you a heads up that you've done this for the table itself. So we try and make that as clear as possible. Okay, one other thing that I am noticing here, we have comments on here. Again, very useful if this was a task and collaborating as a team. I can add emojis and upload a file and add comments, all of that. I also can see the full history here I can see, who created the row, what changes were there, when did all the things happen, actually jump right into the version history of when something happened. I can change whether I get notified, all this information. But really, all of this bottom section here is about collaborating and working on whatever the entity is. And in this case, that doesn't matter at all because we're just trying to look at it. And so again, we like to give you the ability to show and hide whatever is useful for your situation. And so again, if I just come into the layout options, I can actually just hide the comments. And now it won't show up at all. It's totally gone. And similarly, we have this little thing here that says show all of the hidden columns. And this lets you see all of the columns which you didn't show in your display. But in this case, maybe we don't want people poking around with the underlying data. We're going to give them what we think they should be looking at. We kind of want to control what that user experience, what that user interface looks like. And so again, I can just hit that little I, and now it's gone. So already we have made this look a whole lot better, and I think we can do even further. So one of the things you said I think is a great idea. We can add in this image here. So maybe I want to pop it up here and shrink it down. Of course we have some options here, so I can actually control the size of this manually.
Oh, great.
So I probably don't want it to be that big. So let's set it to be 25 by 25, and now it's going to be a nice small little icon. Right? I don't need it to be giant if I don't want it to. In this case, I probably don't need to say that it's the image URL. I think it's apparent that it's an image, that it's an icon, right? So I can actually just get rid of that as well. So if I just click on that field, we have all these visual options about how you want it to look. And I can say, I don't want any label at all. And so now the label will be totally hidden. And I think maybe 25 is a little small, so maybe let's bump that up to 35 and see how that looks. We can play with this to our heart's content and make it look however we like. I'll also just, for my own purposes, image URL was just the default column name, but that's not a super helpful column name. So I can actually change the column name right here as well and just say this is the icon image URL. So I know exactly what it is. And again, this is updating it in the base table. So now if we go back to that, source data page, it's now updated this column to be called icon image URL. And right. I'll just point out, because it's not always obvious to folks, that all of the formulas and references you write in Coda are all kind of live updating. So they will update if you change one of the names. So if I had a formula that was referencing that column, maybe I wanted to show the image but in a different size. So
they just don't break.
Exactly.
They just break.
If I had done this in Excel, it would break, right? If I came in here and I decided I don't actually need the URL, it's just icon image, right? It's kind of too verbose of the name. And I had done a VLOOKUP to that column, which is how I would have done that in Excel. This would have broken. But now you can see it just seamlessly updated. It knows that it's now called icon image. So it's a little thing, but it makes your life much, much easier, because you really don't have very much commitment to what you name things. Just like when you're writing code, you can change the name of that variable, if you will, at any point, and it will update all of the things that have referenced it. So it's nice and updates live. Okay, so let's see where we are now. So we have this kind of nice visual interface that is showing a little icon. I think that icon probably still could be bigger, but we could tweak that more later. Maybe we want it to be right aligned. There's a number of things we could do to make that look good. I think one of the things we haven't shown here at all is the actual reviews themselves, and then maybe some kind of synthesis of those reviews as well. So if you remember, we had done that little reverse lookup, which pulled in all of the tool ratings. And again, this is a lookup column. And it's using a formula that's finding all the ratings that match the current tool. And you can see that, I'll just undo what it did automatically for us. When we were looking at this in the base table, we just had these little chips that showed the tool ratings. And of course, these are rich references, so I could hover over it and see all the information linked to it. I could open it up and, jump right to that tool and see the information. But in this case, we have a lot of visual space. And so just seeing these individual chips isn't actually so useful. I probably want to see the full review itself. And so what we allow you to do is create subtables, we call them. So basically, I can choose to show those row references as the actual rows themselves. So now I basically have a little table within my table. So for each one of these rows, I'm showing all of the ratings that have been submitted for that tool as a subtable. And just like a full-on table, I have all of the things that I might want to do. For example, I can show and hide different columns. So in this case, we probably want to have all of the scores, the iCore framework. Maybe we don't want to do the pros and cons. Maybe we want you to have to click into the review to see the full write-up of it. But maybe we just want your kind of top level summary, which is how did you think the tool was based on these scales, right? And
we don't
again,
need
if I
the
wanted
tool
to show
name.
this, exactly, we don't need the tool name. So I can just hide this just like I would any other one. I will note before I hide that, again, we also try and be smart about these systems. So if I go ahead and add in a new row here, it's actually smart enough to know that because we're in the context of this subtable, we're within Notepad++, it automatically filled in the tool to be Notepad++. So it tries to be a little smart there. But you're absolutely right. We do not need the tool here, so I can go ahead and hide that. So that's really probably everything we need here. I mean, maybe I'll try and take up the whole space here. That doesn't look so good. So maybe we do actually want the pros and the cons. We could finagle how we want this to look. And of course, we could show this in different ways as well. Maybe we actually want this to be cards. In this case, I think having the density is probably good, but that's absolutely up to you. Maybe you want the little radar chart for each person's reviews individually, and so then having a set of cards would actually work really well. So lots of ability to tweak and make that exactly how you want it to look. In this case, maybe I'll just space these out a little bit so we're taking up the full width.
Yeah, I think having the pros and cons listed below, this would be very helpful so people can scroll through the opinions, and having an average of input, control, output, refine, and total. So an average of the average.
Right.
No, it's the average of this. It's the average of the individual review, actually.
Right.
So it's the iCore, up here, the iCore rating then.
Right. So up here we have, the average input, control, output, refine.
Yeah.
But we also could do some more summaries. So, one thing we could do is, we actually could summarize these columns and show it below the table. But I think that's a little duplicative because we have it right up above. But I think what you were saying is maybe we actually want the total score. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the iCore score that we just call it. And then it's one column, each row. Which just shows the average of input, control, output, refine. So you can get rid of these columns, have only the iCore score, and instead show the pros and cons next to it. So if people want to see the individual, and then the question is there a way to show people still the individual ratings of this person? I think it is possible because we just need to click into this row. Then,
exactly. You can just go another layer down. So we'll start with that iCore score there. And I think this is again going to output a number, but we probably want this as that nice little scale again. So I'll just make this scale and set it back to bolts. But this scale we're going to control formulaically. So again, I can just come into the scale options and add a formula, or I can just add a formula here. I do this a lot. So
I mean, it's a score. So it's a score. Maybe we could show percentage.
Yeah, sure.
Just to have a bit of a change there. But I think it is always, in this case, then more comparable if I see 60% versus 90%.
Right. Okay, so we want to output a percent. That makes perfect sense. So in this case, I'm going to write a formula for this column, which takes those averages. So we'll add in a column here that takes the average of a number of values, right? So this is just average, and it says what values do I want to fill in here? Well, I'm going to want the average of the input, the control, the output, and the refine. And I'll just click on each of these to show, that these are referencing for this row, for this person's review of the tool, pull out the individual input score that they have. And it gives me all sorts of information. We talked about this last time, that it's outputting a number. It gives me an example of what it is, where it is, all that stuff.
So one question here. So is it possible to pick the row below, for example? So I guess that's just another syntax then, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's not a next row formula, but you absolutely can write a formula that gets to the next one. There's a couple ways to do it depending on what the use case is. In most cases where you need to do that, you're doing kind of like running totals, where you say the total line items up to this date was X, and the total line items in the next one is X plus whatever this row is. And so usually the way you'll do that is you do some filtering where you say, take all the entries in this table, find all the ones that are before the date in this row, add them together, and do the next one. If you really want to do it manually, you also can do that. We let you do almost anything you want in Coda. And so we have this nice little find formula, which says, look at this given table and tell me, am I the first row? Am I the second row? Am I the third row? And so you could say, find the current row. I'm the second one, for example, and then just take the table and go to the third row. It's not the most efficient. So if you're doing a giant 10,000, 100,000 row table, it probably isn't the best thing to do. But in a small table, it works perfectly fine. So that formula is something like.
But for the next, I mean, we're going a different road now there, but yeah. I'm interested. So the find function sounds very. Just quickly, the find function makes sense. So I would just imagine that I can just subtract from this in order to be.
So basically, if I write this little formula, it says take all the rows in the current table and then find me. It says, take all the ones that are around me and find me, and it spits out the index. So again, I can always click it and click onto this and see all the information about what the formula does. It says find the position of a value. So it says I'm the second one. So this means I'm in the second row in the table currently.
And now I just can say -1 and exactly.
-1. And then if I want to, that's the index of the row before me. And if I want to get that in the table, I could just add up in the front this table.nth, and nth says find the item at a certain index. So now this is saying find the item in this table that is one before wherever I am in this current table. So
see, it's that simple.
Total tangent.
Okay.
You really
thanks for going this road. Now let's go back what we actually want to build. But it's good to see that there's always a solution.
Yeah,
and it's still not that complicated. That's the important thing.
It still looks pretty simple and makes sense once you've seen it. It just takes a little bit of familiarity.
Probably so now just go ahead.
So now we have this average of input, control, output, refine. And so this is, again, going to give us a score between 0 and 5. But you said you wanted percent, kind of a percent score out of 100%. And so what we'll want to do is just divide this total score by 5. So that if it's 5 out of 5, it's 1, it's 100%. If it's 0 out of 5, it's 0%. And so now this is going to spit out some number between 0 and 1, and it will nicely show that to us as a percent.
Yeah, love it.
So now you can see that Tom rated Notepad++ at 80%, and I rated it at 60%. And we can see all the reasons why we rated it, why we didn't rate it.
Nice.
And then to get to your question of maybe I really do want to see why did Tom rate it so much higher than Noah? That's a pretty significant difference, 20%, right? What contributed to that? And so because this is a row, I can just open up the row. I can just hit that little expand thing again. And I have this nice little back button, so I can go up and down that hierarchy and see different things. Of course, this is a different layout here, right? So I can control this layout exactly as I want, and I could set this to be totally different. Maybe I want to have the tool up first, and then the person, and then all the scores. I could really fiddle with this to my heart's content, just like we're doing on the other one. But I'll pretend we'll do that for another time.
Okay, one more. Go back.
Yeah.
And then now let's add 2 more columns in here. So it shows the highest rating and the lowest rating. So it just spits out input, control, output, refine, depending on what is the highest rating. So it gives already an implication why is the score as it is. So it's bad and refine.
So basically you want this to spit out either input, control, output, or refine based on what is the minimum or maximum.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Not that complicated, I know. But
so let's add another little formula. So in this case, for the highest one, we're just going to want to find the maximum of all of the 4 scores, right? So we want to say, out of input, control, output, and refine, what is the maximum? That's actually just going to give us the number. So that's not quite what we want, right? Maybe helpful for one thing, but in this case, I just want to know which of those columns is the greatest. There's a couple different ways that we could do that. I think probably the way that I would actually do this. So if you think back, so again, this is showing me all of kind of the things I have access to, all of the columns in that the tool ratings table. If I look at what I have, oops, let me come into that formula again. I have.
So if this and that would be just too complex in this case.
So we certainly could. So let's just show to show kind of the
simplest
way
if it is the max, then show.
Right. So okay. So let's write that as an example, right?
And
So
you mentioned last time already, it's much easier using if this and that in Coda due to
right.
the,
So in
we don't, yeah.
So in this case, I think actually we could use a switch if,
Mm-hmm.
which says, take any number of conditions and decide if they're true, do something about it. So for example, let's say if input is the largest, right? So this is this row dot input score. If that score is equal to the maximum out of all of them. So again, I could write this, max of input, control, output, refine. Then we're going to want to do something. If it is the maximum, then output the just string input, and that could be it. That could be a full formula. In this case, it's only ever going to do one thing. It's only ever going to do it if it's the maximum, right? And then similarly, we would write another condition for this switch if that says instead if control is the maximum, then output control. There's a couple things that you can see probably aren't good here. The first one that catches my
because
eye.
I have manual text in here. So now we're at the point, whenever I change to not name it input, but capture or something, or collect, then these will be the formula that I need to find manually and find the issue why it's not updating on my table.
Right. Exactly. And so, if we decide that we don't actually want it to be input, that's absolutely a good one. The other thing I noticed here is I'm duplicating this whole formula right here, which I really don't need to be doing. And so, we have a nice way to kind of store a result. We're getting into some complicated formulas now, but we have this formula called with name, which says, do some formula and then give it a name so that I don't have to rewrite it. And so what I can actually say is, take this maximum of all the values and say, let's call that max value. And then we can actually use max value later on when we're writing our other parts of the formula. So I can say if the input is equal to max value, if the control is equal to max value. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I can maybe clean this up
everybody
a
who's
bit.
listening and watching this, just want to mention here, this will become very complex. I think when we finish the whole platform, and it just should show what you can do with Coda. You certainly could learn all this on your own and build this, but there are also Coda consultants out there who are there to build a system that fits your company. And I'm talking already to some of them joining the paperless movement as partner experts. So they will be part of the paperless movement community as well. Excited to also send you to the right people there who can help you, going more into complex stuff. Because this is usually the situation, what we are right now, where I think, okay, let's go back to Notion and do something simple instead, because I have no time right now to build this. So I'm excited that we built this together now. I'm learning a lot. You guys are learning a lot. And but I wouldn't build this on my own. This is just how it is, because I have no time to learn this in such detail. So it is very simple. It is very simple. It's certainly a lot easier than having a developer starting all this from scratch and building your databases on a website and using MySQL or whatever. So the basics for the Coda delivers here is just awesome. This is just much easier to build stuff. And at the end of the day, it saves time for the consultant building you this, and saves time and a lot of money then in this case as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's also, I think, a big part is it's much easier to change when you want to change it later on. If you decide that something doesn't quite work for you, you very often can do that yourself without going back to your consultant, or you can work with them and it's a very simple change to make it look like you want it to look or do what you want. So, I wrote that formula. I don't think that's the nicest formula for a variety of reasons. I think we could do better, but I think we can leave that for now. So I think maybe one final thing that we could do today, we now have these set of tool ratings here. Maybe we want, and again, we said you could expand this. Maybe what we want is to have a nice little word cloud that shows all of the words that people use in describing a specific tool. What are all of the words they use in cons, and what are the ones they use in pros? Maybe lots of people are saying slow for a certain tool. You probably want to be able to see that that's something that people say frequently, to kind of synthesize the unstructured data, the unstructured feedback that people have left. So there's a number of ways that we could do that. We could use our new canvas column type. So if I just go ahead and add back that summary column, we now have this kind of blank area where I could add anything I want. I could add in a table. And in this case, I probably am going to want this to be the tool ratings table, and I probably am going to want to show it as a word cloud. And then we could choose, what are we showing? Is it the words from cons, the word from pros? And of course, we'd have to filter it down to be the one that matches. So
perfect.
We
not
absolutely
formatting.
can't do it. It's written a sentence. It's becoming sentient already.
All right.
So that's one way of doing it. I'll highlight that another way is we can actually reuse that same concept of subtables that we used before. So if I go ahead, right now we have all the tool ratings here, but if I'm just going to actually add a new column after this one, and I'm just going to basically make a duplicate of that tool ratings. And so now this is going to be like ratings word cloud. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to reference the tool ratings. And so basically it is duplicating that column. It says, in this one, find all of what's in here. In this one, find all of what's in there. I really just duplicated it. The benefit is I just didn't have to rewrite this formula. There's no need to duplicate it. It's just doing the kind of table filtering and backwards references. It's only doing that once. And of course, I can just note to this that this is a lookup, and this is a lookup to the tool ratings table. And so, what this looks like so far is very, very similar to what we did to make that subtable here of all of the tool ratings. And in fact, I'll just add that back in, and it'll look very similar. It's basically, the same thing here. Move this whole thing up, showing as a table. But what I can do is, instead of showing this as a table, just like any view or any table in Coda, I can show this a different way. I can actually show this as a word cloud right here and choose what it's displaying. So in this case, I want all the pros, all the cons. I don't think there's any reviews for that one, so we'll go to this one. And now you can see what I have here is I'm showing from this little subtable, it's the same set of data from all of those ratings, what are, in this case, I set it to be all of the pros. And then I could do exactly the same thing for the cons. And so this is kind of filtering down all of the data that's pulled in. I can actually tell it to include or not include common words. I could, manually take out some words. So maybe I actually want to manually pull out the name of this one. Anytime that someone mentions word, it shouldn't show up, because that's going to be super common, right? So if I wanted to,
can we add a formula there as well? So can we pick the title? So otherwise we always have to add manually.
Yeah, this looks like a rare instance of a case that we don't have a formulaic entry.
Yeah, welcome to my world,
great feature request, though. You found the one spot.
I'm very well known in the support services of any tool that I always find the one thing that they haven't implemented.
No, that's a great use case, though. I will add a feature request for that, because that would be a perfect spot to be able to do it formulaically.
Yeah, you came up with this because you said, it makes sense to filter out the tool that's all about, obviously.
Absolutely.
But adding this manually is just no option, if this becomes thousands of tools in the database.
Right. So let's if you want to, again, just to prove that you can do anything you want to do in Coda, right? I'll just come back to this original tool ratings table here, and I'll say pros without name, without tool name. And I can actually just write a formula that does exactly what you want it to do. So, let me just modify one of these. So instead of saying so blazing fast, I can say, what tool is this about? This is word. Word is so blazing fast. And in this case, I probably want to filter out word. Right. And so what I can do is I can say, take all of the data that's in pros. This is just text in this case. And I can use.
I see what you do there.
There's a number of different ways. In this case, I'll just use regex replace, and I'll say anything that is, and I could, manually type in word and just replace it with nothing, and it would just delete it. But actually, I can be smarter than that, right? This is basically as bad as what we were just saying before. I'd have to manually type it in. And so instead, I can just reference the tool in this column and get the name of the tool. And so in this case, it says anytime you see the name of the tool in that text, just replace it with an empty character. It just takes it away. It's gone. In this case,
and now you can use this for the word cloud, and that's good. And you can hide the column to stay clean. Yeah, that's great. Good workaround.
So if I just come back here, yeah, there's always a way to do it. So instead of doing prose, I can do prose without name, and now Word won't show up. Actually, I think Word wasn't showing up because
I get it. It might be not as intuitive as that you can do it directly there. But as you can do it this way, probably not enough of a use case to get this out quickly, this update. So
yeah,
no need.
Maybe not for this one, but I can definitely suggest it.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's probably enough to give the idea for today. But I'll also just point out with this rich one, if we had done it the other way, if I had added in the word chart here, add in a word cloud, and let's just pretend it's one word cloud here. Oops, jump to the wrong spot. And I was adding in, I'll just do 2 of these. This is now in the canvas in that cell. I have all of the rich functionality of the canvas, so I could also drag these side by side, for example. Oops, looks like maybe we have a little bug there. So if I wanted to show the pros right next to all the cons, I can actually put those 2 tables next to each other, because now we have that kind of multi-column support. In this case, it probably would have been just as simple to do that with the layouts, right? If I had 2 of these subtables, I also could show them next to each other. So there's lots of ways that you can customize it to look exactly like you want. But I think this gives us a good example that we've now built this really nice simplified version. Yeah.
One last question here. Is it possible to click on one of these words and use it as a filter in order to filter the table below or above? That would be interesting.
That is a great suggestion. That'd be very cool. Yeah, we don't have it. So currently there's some information, which is if you hover over it, you can see
that's why I'm asking, because I see it's actually interacting. So it might be possible to hook it in there.
Some of our charts are visually interactive, so you can actually zoom in on them, for example, if you want to look at a specific spot. That's a fun little Easter egg that a lot of people don't know about Coda.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it can be very helpful. But that's another great suggestion would be to be able to use it as a filter. So I think that again, if we were to do a workaround to do something similar, we could just put a little control above this table, and you could filter down for all the ones that include the word easy, for example. And we could pull out the most frequent words and allow you to choose it. Or we could just even have a text box that says, filter down this table to all the ones that include blazing. I really want to know all the ones that say fast. So we don't have that feature, but I like the idea.
Good, thanks. I thank you very much. This is coming together very well. Next week, everybody. So if you enjoyed this, obviously, let us know in the comments below. Excited to move forward with this whole project that we are doing here. And I guess next week we will meet again. Noah, you're up for this?
Yeah, I would love to. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it sounds good to me too. So let's do this. Next week, we will dive more into this. I think in the meantime, I will go through this if I have some time and see if I can add a bit more of data so we can visualize a bit more and play around with this. And then we will slowly get things together. Let's see what we do next week. Maybe we connect already an external database.
Yeah, maybe we'll pull in some data from Typeform or something like that.
Exactly. All right. Then I see you next week, Noah. Thank you very much for joining, for all the time that you spent here. And I really love how you describe this and you usually take away the questions. I always take a breath and start, and then you already mention it. So we absolutely on one wavelength here. So thank you very much for being on this with me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure being here. I love doing it.
See you next time.
See you next time.